Hi, my name's Elijah, and welcome to my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters. Today, my special guest is Jinder. Jinder is one of the hardest working singer-songwriters in the UK. He's also a friend, and he's also played in my band, The Gravity Drive. We speak about his early influences, his life and journey as a songwriter. He was signed to Sony BMG and Universal Records and was 1/3 of the group The Mercurymen. We speak about how his song Keep Me In Your Heart ended up being one of the movie Fisherman's friends, and much, much more. So please subscribe and enjoy this podcast. Whilst I have your attention, please check out my book, The Songwriter's Handbook, now available on Amazon, inside which there are 52 ideas and subjects for you to explore and hopefully find a seed or spark for your own songwriting, lyric writing or creative writing. So thanks for listening. Please check out the book and enjoy this podcast. My name's Elijah and welcome to my podcast, Songwriting for Songwriters. This week, my special guest and very dear friend is Jinder. Jinder, how are you doing?
Hey Elijah, yeah, I'm very well. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, really good. So thanks for being on the podcast. Just to let you know, when I've been putting it out there to people, like who would you like me to speak to? Your name's come up a number of times, so your audience want to hear from you.
Fantastic.
So,
That's nice to hear.
Here we go. So first of all, what or who inspired you to dedicate your life to songwriting?
I think initially the person who kind of fired off my curiosity with songwriting was my grandmother. She was a choral arranger, a pianist, and very much into all sorts of different varieties of music, kind of a musicologist really. And she was sort of the rock star of the family. Every few sort of Sundays along, we'd have to like sit in front of songs of praise and wait for Granny to come on conducting some choir or other that she'd been doing arrangements for. So she was a person who, when I was about 4 years old, she sat me on her piano stool next to her. In fact, the piano that's right in front of me in this room now, which she willed to me when she passed away. And she sat me on her piano stool and was like, "This is a chord," and was showing me like triads and kind of worked to show me how things work in terms of chords and harmonies and keys and all that kind of stuff. And that was the thing that fired my curiosity, I think.
Beautiful. Do you know what? That's the nearly exactly the same answer for me. My dad was a songwriter, but my great grandmother was this lovely old lady with a fur coat who'd like smoke cigarettes and play piano at the play piano when we were around there. Give us a bag of 2 pence coins when we went to see her, and she was a huge influence on me to begin with. It's just that elegant grandmother playing piano thing was a big start for me too. So it's nice you've got the piano though. That's amazing that you've got that heirloom.
Yeah, I mean it's been on. I think it's been on every record I've ever made in some capacity. It just it's just there. And you know what? I mean, I inherited it in 2011, and it's never gone out of tune. It's still in tune enough. I've never had it tuned. In fact, it was I had it brought here by a piano mover, and it's moved house with me a couple of times. But it's just bang on. It's like it never goes out of tune, and it's
something else. That's amazing.
Yeah, there's a little bit of her in there in the notes and the overtones. I can kind of feel her spirit in there, which is it's amazing. Always songs come forth when I sit at that piano. Definitely.
I think that's true, about instruments and about. I think there is, you're someone who's. I mean, you're a great guitar player, and you. I always feel there's some kind of spirit of something or someone in a secondhand guitar anyway, in a kind of older. There's got to be, hasn't there, an impression of other people's emotions and talent.
Definitely think so. I think that the guitars are kind of the sum of all of those parts that have been put into them, all of the chords and songs and everything that have been played on them over the years. That it lingers in there. It shapes the tone and the sound. It's there's every instrument has a soul, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. So you've had like an amazing. I mean, we've been friends for years, and our bands when we were in our late teenage years played together. And we've been around, and we've been in a band together, good friends, and we've been, around the same circles of gigs and venues for I don't know 20 years or so. But one of the things I've always admired from my point of view about you is how prolific you are as a record maker and a songwriter, because it feels to me like you're from the kind of new young canon of writers who's just like, I've got this set of songs, I'm going to make this record. The record comes out, and you do it again, and you do it again, and I love that you do that. And I saw went on your website and it said it's 14 albums. Is that right? 14 albums.
Yeah, I think so. I stopped counting a few. I know I've now made twice as many albums as I've sold. So I think the
So is that your thing though? Am I right in guessing that's the way that you kind of look at being a songwriter, that you're prolific and you like to get the work out there? Is that important to you to kind of be, constantly um creating work?
100%. Yeah, it's all about continuation, and it's all about sort of building a body of work for me. I think when Lou Reed was my age, he was interviewed. This would have been '86. I think it was Robert Christgau who interviewed him, and he said, "Well, you keep making records, even though your last few albums haven't really sold a huge amount, and you kind of do you still feel you're relevant? What is your career about at this stage?" And he said, "It's just about continuation." He said, about my body of work, and it's about what I leave behind. It's about my life." And I've always felt the same with records. I love the process of writing songs and doing pre-production, working on arrangements and everything, and the studio, and then releasing them, and touring, that kind of thing. It's just a cycle. Which, I mean, I suppose I started that kind of working like that probably 20 years ago, and I've never really stopped. It is, yeah, it's about continuation. I think just keeping working and keeping going.
Yeah. That's
That's
very, I think it's very healthy, that, and also, I mean, it's who you are, isn't it? That's who you are, as I know you to be. Well, I think, I think, would you refer to yourself as that's who you are? You are a songwriter. That's what you're here for.
definitely, yeah. I'm primarily a songwriter. Everything else is just butter on the bread, really. It's like, yeah, I sing and play guitar and play piano and whatnot, but the root thing that I'm here to do is write songs and make records. And I've always kind of felt like that. The whole reason I picked up a guitar in the first place when I was 12 years old was firstly because the piano was a pain in the ass to fit in the back of a car, but also because it was, it was something I could take with me wherever I went. It was portable, and whenever I got an idea, I figured if I learn 3 chords and buy a capo, and it's kind of held true. I now know 4, but like, it's kind of the thing, you got a capo and you got your basic chord knowledge and you got your guitar and you're good to go.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite record of yours that you've made out of those 14?
I'm really attached to the last 3. I think the last one, I think Codetta, the latest one, is probably the most complete record I've made, and it kind of feels quite nice to be in a position where I can say that. Whereas I always think you've got to be creeping a little further forward artistically and creatively with every record, and I think the last 3 I've really kind of hit a bit of a hot streak, kind of working with Peter James Wilson, who's produced them, and a few other players. I must apologize for the background noise, by the way. I've got 2 kittens who are just like literally tearing the house apart, so if there's any noise, I do apologize.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, no, I think it's kind of nice to feel that there's still this kind of upward trajectory in terms of my work. And so I would say if I had to pick one, it would probably be Codetta. I think the latest one. I think that's a very sort of concise statement of where I was at the time when I made it.
Brilliant. Always nice when your last record's one that you can stand by like that. That's a really nice thing to hear, because it's important that to be still excited by your own record making and songs.
Mm.
Your lyrics are very beautiful and very you're a poet, and it's sometimes with when I listen to your songs, it's like, and I've heard other people say this actually, it takes them a minute to find their way in, not melodically and not as a song structure that it's there immediately as you're a great songwriter like that, but in terms of they getting into the lyrics they talk about, and I have found myself very much enjoying the surprise element of like sitting with your lyrics and going, I wonder what he's talking about, and then you're going, oh wow, okay. And sometimes it's elusive and sometimes it's not. I'm really interested to know, because I think you do that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you do that on purpose to kind of bring people in, introduce them to language, balance language. This is one of your skill sets, I think. It makes you a unique songwriter. How much of you is using language to highlight what you're feeling and hide what you're feeling? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, you've nailed it. You know me too well. That's exactly what I'm doing. I kind of lyrically, I kind of view songs as like a rebus, like a, you know, the ancient puzzle form where you've got to work with colors and shapes and kind of find a thing that makes a much bigger whole with these little kind of inflections and highlights and whatever. And I think that's it. I mean, a lot of it is I love words. I've always loved language. I get that from my mum. My mum is an extremely wordy woman, and I grew up with this kind of passion for words and language and kind of bending and tweaking and pulling at the edges of the envelope of the English
Mm.
language.
Yeah.
And that's something which I love about songwriting. I love being able to say something simple, but in a way that perhaps hasn't been said before or hasn't been said in a song form before. You know, I've read a lot of stuff over the years, and a lot of the poetry that really resonates with me is it's sort of a mixture of stuff, but I mean, primarily my late friend Jackie Leven sort of suggested I check out the Silver Age of Russian poetry, you know, Mayakovsky and Bloch and people like that. That was a big influence. In fact, my album The Silver Age is named after the Silver Age of Russian poetry. Very unpoetically, just literally named record, but also people like E. E. Cummings, and like there's lines in E. E. Cummings poems. The one that always sticks in my mind is, it, you know, if I should lose you, I should be terribly lost, and I should turn my head and hear one bird sing terribly afar in the lost lands. I think that's just such a powerful image. You can taste it, you can chew on it, and you can almost step into it. You can wade in, and you know, yeah, people like E. Cummings, Philip Larkin. I've referenced Philip Larkin by name in a few of my songs. You know, with especially if I feel I kind of like to burst my own bubble a little bit sometimes, in as much as, you know, if I say something in a song that kind of references or half references or says something that's reminiscent of a poem or something else that's gone before, I'm not afraid to make reference to that and almost name check the author or whatever
Yeah.
in the song. I think that's a little bit of sort of self-effacing
Mm.
stuff that I like to do. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you know, that like the what's the Philip Larkin line about you know, the fires burn in humped inns, kippering sea pictures, whilst uh, waves fold behind buildings and night comes on, or something like that. It's that sort of
Yeah.
that imagery that sort of, I mean, what, you know, he's sitting in a pub next to a fire looking at a picture whilst it's getting dark, but that's so much more beautiful a way to express it, and that's what I've always strive for, to kind of do that, you know, to present, you know, here's the world we've all known forever, but in like a new light or from a new angle or something like that. It's, yeah, it's a big ambition, but you know, if you can do like 1% of it, you know, it's got to be
Well,
worth doing.
it's really nice to hear you talk about that, actually, because it's you know, this is what the thrill of doing these podcasts is, getting behind the process and behind the thoughts of people like yourself, and you know, just hearing you talk about those poets and where you're coming from, is it gives an extra texture to to listen to your work, you know. So is are you, one of the things, I mean, it must be the case, because I mean, I know you well enough to know you're a busy man, and you have 7 beautiful children and a lovely
Yes.
wife, and you work a lot and gig a lot. So when and where do you write your songs?
All the time. There's always I'm always kind of wary of the fact that I know Thea Gilmore alluded to this in the interview that you did with her, with about her being a fear-driven artist. And I'm not really a fear-driven artist, but I'm also aware of the fact that if you stop using the muscle, it can desert you. So I've always got my antennae up, you know, in terms of imagery and things that capture my imagination and things that catch my eye. You know, something, you know, can I put this in a song? Can I put that in a song? And you sort of, always, I mean, the thing is, I know that we've spoken about this before when we've talked about writing sort of off record. But a lot of the time I'm driving home from a gig at 1 o'clock
Yeah.
in the morning, and
Yeah.
that the light bulb goes on, and you're like, I've
Yeah.
got to pull over and I've got to capture this. And
Yeah.
you're singing into voice notes, and you're jotting things down in your phone, and all of that kind of stuff. I'd love to say that I dedicate 4 hours a day writing with a quill and my own blood on a piece of papyrus like Nick Cave did in the 80s, but I don't do that. I just grab. You've got to. I mean, Catherine Williams. There's a great. You interview Catherine Williams, didn't you?
Yeah.
Just dropping names here. Clang. Catherine Williams is song. I can't remember the name of it, but it's about being a busy person and a parent and still finding time to write. And the line is, I've got to make these moments count before these moments count themselves. And I think that's it. You've got to grab every little opportunity and keep your brain ticking and your eyes open. And that's my approach anyway.
Love that. Love that. Do words come first? Does melody come first? Does music come first? What's the Jinder sort of habitat in song terms? Like what's the kind of order of things?
I would say, I mean, it always used to be the case that I'd take a different approach with every record. Some of them I would, for example, an album I made called Crumbs of Comfort in 2012. With that, all of those songs were written at the words, lyrics, melody at the same time. I'd sit down with a guitar and a blank sheet of paper, and I would kind of hash them out and sort of force them into life. Um, Other records, like the album after that, Traditional Dark, I wrote the music first and then I
That's my
put
favorite.
words to everything. Oh, you like that one best? That's
That's my
interesting.
favorite. That's my favorite. Yeah, that's my favorite. Yeah.
It's that album was difficult to make. It was all recorded on a 4-track cassette recorder, and I recently had to deal with Universal, which had come to an end with my previous record, and I wanted to make the least major label-y sounding record ever. So I got this junky old like cassette 4-track and made it in my bedroom, with Ryan, actually, Ryan,
Yeah.
of Gravity Drive fame. And it was a really cool record to make, but it's such a labor of love trying to make an old cassette 4-track sound like a record. And
Mm.
then just when I'd got it all done, mixed everything, I sent it off to be mastered, and the mastering, the first iteration, the mastering is horrible. And there was some kind of problem with the mastering. I can't remember what it was, but it was just dreadful. I couldn't afford to get it redone. So the first iteration of it came out with this really janky mastering job.
Right.
But then when I was in the studio making the Silver Age in 2019, I found all the files and the mixes and everything, and I remastered it and then reissued it with an extra track, like a director's cut version, I think I called it, put it on Spotify and everything. That's the version to seek out. The original CD sounds horrible, but I think there's some good songs on that. But that was all. The majority of them were written music first, and then I sat with the music and the structures and kind of chewed over where I wanted to go lyrically with them. But recently, I think the last three have all been written lyrics first. I've been really zoning in on that. Kind of fine tuning the lyrics and sort of getting to where I want to go imagery wise, and then kind of going, well, how inspiring is this? Are these lyrics to in terms of music and melody? And I always write lyrics with like a meter and kind of a melodic leaning in mind. But yeah, no, the last three have been lyrics first, then music, which has been quite a fruitful way to work. I mean, I've sort of ended up with a lot more songs than are on the records, so I could sort of pick and choose between them. But yeah, no, that's at the moment that's my favored MO, I would say.
Great. You alluded there just to major labels, and you were with a trio called the Mercurymen for a number of years, and signed
Yeah.
with and by yourself to Sony, B&G, and Universal. What was your experience of being in that environment as a songwriter? Because we hear from different. I've always been independent, well, I was managed, but I have basically been independent through my own career and through the Gravity Drive. But I know that you've been in the major label um, game as well as being an independent, and I'm just really fascinated to know what your take home was from that, what your experience was of that as a songwriter.
Well, as somebody, an artist, personally, I like to do what I want and be able to follow my nose creatively and kind of conceptualize records and go where I want to go with that. There's no support with that on a major label at all. Basically, when I was with the Mercurymen, we signed to Sony BMG on the strength of one song.
Yeah.
and they then basically said, go away and make an album of another 9 of these. And we literally had to sit there sweating in these writing sessions. And I got to write with some really cool people. I wrote with Ricky Ross from Deacon Blue, and collaborated with all sorts of people. Henry Priestman, who's a great artist, and we wrote all sorts of stuff. And there's some songs on that record that I'm quite proud of, but the experience was quite stifling artistically. It was very much to order, and it was very much preordained. The label wanted things a certain way, and we tried going, well, here's something that's sounds a bit more like Big Star, and they'd go, nope, that's not what we want. Or here's something that sounds a bit like Fairport Convention. Nope, we want something that sounds like Mumford and Sons, and everything was Mumford and Sons at the time, and we weren't them, and that was kind of tricky. But after that, my experience with Universal, as initially a writer and then a solo artist, was a bit more copacetic, really. I mean, they signed me. My eldest child was a baby at the time, and I said to my manager, I need some income. I need to do something other than going out gigging 5 to 6 nights a week and being on tour all the time. So I've got this baby that I need to raise, and he very kindly, the great Ian W. Brown, he sorted out a publishing deal for me with Universal as a staff writer, basically writing to order. I'd get the wanted sheets every week, and I'd sit there, baby on one knee, guitar on the other, and I pitched loads and loads of songs to loads and loads of people. I think I got a cut with Alid Jones and another one with Nick Knowles of DIYSOS, all the big names. Eventually, after about 18 months, my term was up with the label, and they said, we haven't had a hit, but we think the songs are great. Would you like to make a record for us? So I thought, well, okay, yeah, fair enough. I don't often get asked to make a record for a major. So I made the album Crumbs of Comfort that we were talking about just now, and I spent. I mean, it was quite nice in a way, because they sort of gave me a blank check and said, not for my own consumption, but to pay for studio time and session players. And I got to work with, people who played on Blue Nile records and Van Morrison records, and Alex Reeves, who's the drummer with Elbow, he played on it, and there's loads of great players on the record. And I turned it in, and the label sort of went, oh, okay, and they put it out and just sort of let it sort of trickle out as a soft release thing. And then about 2 months after it came out, I arrived home and found a pallet of 7,000 CDs on my doorstep. And I rang Ian, my manager, and I said, Ian, I've got 7,000 CDs on my doorstep. What's going on? And he said, what do you think's going on? So that was the end of that, basically. Right. And that's what kind of led to the whole traditional dark thing, and forming my own label and so on. But it was, the Sony experience was stifling and very, very high pressure, because you feel like it's a one-shot deal when you get into that position. And as they say about sports people, you sort of choke a little bit as an artist. You tighten up, and you're not as free with yourself, and overthink everything, and it's difficult. It's tricky. I admire anybody who can convert that major label deal into like a career right at the top tier, because I couldn't do it. It wasn't for me.
Did that, because the thing is about sometimes I had not a major label thing, but sometimes when the industry comes knocking, you can't help but get excited, or there's that idea of the making thing, or the kind of the next big thing, or whatever. All these things happen to anyone who's involved with that kind of thing. From a mental health perspective, did any of that, did you ever buy into that, or did it ever kind of haunt that kind of thing, or were you like balanced enough as a writer to know I'm sort of a songwriter, and this is a part of my adventure? How did you deal with that kind of up and downness of that situation?
It was difficult, I think, in terms of the deal with Sony ended very abruptly because of the credit crunch. We played the Royal Albert Hall, and then 2 days later we were playing another show, and our manager came backstage just as we were about to go on and said, label are letting you go, because the album hadn't come out at that point, the Mercurymen album. And he said, the label are letting you go because they've brought in financial troubleshooters. They're losing £1 million a day, and they're shutting all the subsidiary labels that aren't making money. And of course, we were signed to relaunched Arista. and none of the acts on the label had released anything yet. We'd
Right.
spent about a year kind of building things up and touring and doing all of that kind of thing. So it was very sudden, and that was a real adjustment. I went from living in a beautiful penthouse apartment on the cliff top in Bournemouth to literally within 2 weeks living in my mum and dad's spare bedroom, which was, I mean, I know that's kind of like, you know, luxury problems, but it was, yeah, it was really abrupt. You know, you sort of start, like you say, buying into
Yeah.
the theory of like, here we go, and in reality it can suddenly turn into here we don't.
Yeah.
um
Which the
and
reason I raise it is because the thing is, it's like you said, it's a first world problem. But actually, as an artist, and as songwriters, these things are part of our journey, and they do have profound impact and effect on us as people
mm,
and as songwriters. So I just, because I remember kind of around about that time you moved to Bridport, and we started to get to know each other a bit more, and there was definitely kind of a sort of sense of you coming from somewhere and in transition to somewhere else, and you seem very adjusted and happy where you are now as a songwriter and artist. But that link from Comes of Comfort to traditional dark, and you can hear it in those songs. I think artistically it's been like probably quite a good roller coaster to and as a songwriter
mm.
to. But it's the reason I raised it is just because I think it's your journey is an interesting journey for a songwriter, because you carry, like you said, the continuation. There's 14 albums, you released another one, so I would imagine you would say to other songwriters, and certainly what I feel is that it's so important to keep writing songs, and your journey is going to be your journey, and you don't really have that much control sometimes. It, like you said, credit
Mm.
crunch, it changes, so you've got to carry on, right?
You've got to have your safe harbor, and I think for me, writing is my safe harbor, and it always has been. As long as I'm still making things, as long as I'm still creating and doing, it can be just me on my own, it can be collaborative, whatever. As long as I feel that I've got some forward traction creatively, then I'm fairly well okay. The one time when I really had to exercise some self-control and really be aware of myself and what I needed at the time was in 2016. I had an offer from Polydor. I hadn't worked with a major or anything like that for uh, for probably about 5 years, and based on one song, which was um, just in a bunch of demos that I sent my then publisher. He then sent them on to Polydor, who were looking for writers, and they said, "Oh, we like this song and we want to make a record." But I spoke to them, had meetings, and they said, basically, we want you to do this song, and then we want to pick everything else on the record. And 2016 was a real bust of a year for me, as you know. It was a kind of like a bit of a nightmarish situation. I spent some of it living in the back of a Volvo 940, so it was yeah, a bit of a roller coaster. And I think I knew at that point, I was like, no, in terms of my mental health and my general, you know, sanity, I needed to say no to that, and that was one of the hardest things, the hardest
That's
calls I've
brave.
ever made.
Yeah, that's brave.
And Ian, my manager, and I had a, he was pretty disgusted that I'd chosen to turn it down. He basically said, this is the end of the road for you. You'll never work in the music industry again, because you can't be a prima donna with this stuff. But it wasn't that. It was just, I just knew it wasn't right, and I wouldn't cope with it. So I just made the call, waved the white flag, and it was a real relief, in all honesty,
Yeah.
to have the courage to do that and just go, no, I've been there. I can't do that again. And
For you, man. Good for you. That's great. Where do you think songs come from, and where's your muse? Like you've spoken about, your love of words, but we both know that songs come from somewhere, and lots of people think they're crafted by, like you said, sitting at the desk and sort of, blood, sweat, and tears, and then, as you know as well, they come from nowhere. So I'd really be interested to know where do you think they come from? Do they exist? Where do they exist? What's your muse?
well, I really like the idea that like Booker White, the blues artist, said, he would talk about sky songs, the idea that songs were just floating around, and sometimes you're just the antenna, you're just the radar, and you just happen to be walking through the right airspace to bump into
Yeah,
a song. I think you can put yourself in a position to find more songs, but
yeah,
it's not. I've never really subscribed to the idea that it's about just graft, because I mean, sure, you can put your backside in the chair and write and work and focus, but are you're gonna produce stuff, and it's there is a certain element of, for me as a writer, if I take that approach, which I have in the past, it feels like a monkeys and typewriters thing. It's like if I write enough songs, one of them will be decent, and sometimes that has sort of borne out. But I do think that there's a bit more to it than that. I think there's definitely some elements to it, like a maybe like a celestial element, or like some sort of, none of us, without wanting to extemporize too much on this, none of us really know what's next. That's the thing. And I sometimes wonder whether that's where songs get sent back from, or whether
Nice.
it's
That's nice.
there's a million ways to look at it, but we're all kind of, us songwriters are just kind of human radar dishes in a way. We're just, whether it's picking up the songs themselves or picking up imagery that fires off that spark of inspiration, that sort of moment of revelation or wonder. I think a big part of it is also keeping hold of that childlike sense of wonder about the
Yeah.
world. Nobody ever wrote a great song about being jaded. Well, other than Aerosmith, actually, they had a song about being jaded, which was quite good, but it was called Jaded. I was just busting my point entirely there, but I don't think songs come from a world weariness. I think songs, even writers that have that kind of laconic, jaded persona, like Leonard Cohen, who's one of my favorite writers, you can bet that he was getting excited when he was writing So Long Marianne or The Stranger Song, or Bird on a Wire. You can't sit down and write a song like that without feeling a sense of wonder about the world. Sisters of Mercy, what an incredible song that is. And it's all about just being in a hotel room with two random women and looking out at the frozen wastes of winter Canada. It's like, that's where a lot of stuff comes from. I think just being aware of the world around us, and taking it in, stopping, finding time. And I say this is somebody with 7 kids and a lot on my plate, but finding time to just stop and go, look at that. I think in life, whether it's something you're seeing, nature is something I find really inspiring. The world around us and everything, and people as well. People's feelings and outlooks and everything, and how I love listening to people. That's the thing. I'll often sit and just listen. I listen to the kids. I listen to my wife. I listen to the world going by. I like sitting in a cafe and just earwigging conversations, because everyone's coming from a different place. And I think songs are hidden everywhere. They're like little Easter eggs on a hunt around the garden.
Love that. That's great. My auntie Michelle used to put on the best Easter egg hunts, and she was like my blood uncle's wife, Michelle. I was in love with her growing up, and she just put on the Easter egg hunts. I love that analogy of the Easter egg hunts. That's amazing. That's what it feels like when you get. I did recently happened to me 2 days ago. Picked up my black Sheraton, as you know, and just started playing, and it straight away one came out of the sky, and it was like, "Oh, you're a keeper." And you get those moments where they're not keepers, or you play around, but one just fell out of the sky, and it was like that feeling of finding that Easter egg, because you stay alert, don't you? And then you get them, and sometimes they become songs, sometimes they don't. My own thing that I do know is that the quicker they come, those are the ones that people relate to the most, and those are my best songs, the ones that kind of arrived out of nowhere. Because for me, it's music first, really. It's the initial kind of hook or melody first. There might be some lyric concept floating around, but the ones that come quickest within like the first minute, if I've hit upon that thing and it's showed itself in the first 30 seconds to a minute, those are the ones that end up on the records from my songs. It's just sort of, I need that immediate sort of instinctive hit of universal songwriting heroin.
I've got some. Oh, hold on, I'm back. Sorry, there was some kind of technical issue there. I had a load of warnings come up on the screen.
Wow. Okay, so we're going to jump back. We had a little transition there. We lost a little bit of signal for a second. We're back in the game. So I'm here again with Jinder. So we're gonna jump back in with a question, which I'm going to find in a second, which is, if you weren't a songwriter, What would you be doing, or what would you do?
If I wasn't a songwriter, what would I be doing? I'd probably be something like a guitar tech or something like that.
Okay.
I worked as a tour manager and a guitar tech for a little while some years ago, which was really enjoyable. I mean, I did have this nagging feeling that like I should be out there doing my thing rather than tuning somebody else's guitar and booking their hotels. But it was, yeah, I'd be working in music somehow or another, maybe as a session player or something like that. But yeah, but whether I would have got into music if it wasn't for the sort of desire to write songs, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Sure.
It's hard to say.
So, what advice would you give songwriters?
I mean, the best advice I ever heard was Joe Strummer from the Clash in an interview when he was asked what advice he would give to people who wanted to work as a writer or a musician. He said, "Don't give up, even when you really want to." And I think that's the best advice I can possibly imagine, because all of us, speaking personally, and I think for everyone who's ever written a song and kind of gone head to head with the music business, there are times when you just look at it and you go, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? And why am I subjecting myself to it? I can't afford to eat, But you kind of come full circle, and you find those reasons within yourself. But I mean, that's the thing I would say. And the other thing is, you've got to commit yourself to it fully. It's got to be who you are. If it's in you, it will come out, but you've got to give it permission to. You've got to approach your life every day as a songwriter's day and a songwriter's life. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to, it doesn't have to be the case that you're like, okay, children, I'm not doing the school run today because I'm a songwriter. But you find you sort of find different ways up the wall to get to the other side, as your circumstances change. But it's always got to be, I always approach the day I wake up and sort of get the first coffee of the day on, and then think, well, what is there? What can I write about? That's always in the
Yeah.
back of my mind.
Yeah. There's definitely something true about dedicating to it, which is there's many people who do it for fun and as a hobby, and that's great and that's brilliant. And probably there are a lot, in many ways, probably more got a bigger bank balance and have less stress. But there is something in terms of dedicating to it. There is a kind of you are turning a certain sort of tap on, I think, by dedicating to your art.
Mm, definitely, and it becomes something that's irresistible after a while. It's almost kind of like halfway between a reflex and an addiction. I think
Yeah,
you return to it over and over again.
yeah,
In this, and it's rewarding. And I think the moment I get, if I ever get to the point where I pick up a guitar or sit at the piano and start writing a song and just think, I'm fed up with this, I'm not enjoying it, then maybe that's the time to stop. But
yeah. That
I've
would be
never.
the time to stop. I can't imagine it ever happening, but that would be the time to
Yeah,
stop.
yeah, I can't imagine it happening. But would it
Yeah.
happen? Then that's the time to reconsider, perhaps.
Keep Me in Your Heart. That's featured on Fisherman's Friends, which is a well-known, loved British movie. So, that's a big thing for songwriters. Have a song, soundtracking a key emotional moment in a moving picture. How do you feel about that? How did that kind of come about?
It's sort of the song that refuses to die. I mean, I wrote that song in 2005, and it's been on a couple of different albums I've made in different forms, and various other people have done it, recorded it and released it and stuff. And it's, I'm grateful for its sort of endurance. I suppose it's been one of those songs. To be honest, that's the song that opened the door for my band, the Mercurymen, with Sony. It's the song that I was then signed on the strength of to Universal as a writer. It's opened a lot of doors for me. I just wish I knew where it came from so I could go back there. It's just the one that came together in a way where it chimes with people. I can't really explain why. I wrote it. I wrote it when back in 2005. My cousin Matthew passed away. He had a lot of personal problems without wanting to go too deeply into it, but he he passed away as a result of his relationship with some certain substances. And he was 27 years old, as a lot of people are when that kind of thing happens. And I hadn't seen him for a bit, and he never got the chance. The thing that really bothered me with Matt when we lost him was that he never had the chance to say goodbye, or leave on his terms. It was very unfinished, and that song, I kind of thought to myself, how could I, how could I put myself in his shoes, and how can I, from not in like a song vulture kind of way, but the song was a real like kind of cri de coeur kind of thing. It was, I really, I just wish that, I thought, what message would he want to send to people? And it's a call and response thing. It's like the verses are sung from his perspective and the choruses are sung from my perspective. And it was a really deeply personal thing to write.
Yeah.
Originally it had, I think, 8-9 verses. It was like a big kind of thing, a little bit like Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, but kind of like a Poundland version. But it was like, it was very long, very, very long. And I took it to my friend Steve and Daryl Smith, who produced a lot of the stuff I did for Sony and Universal. And we'd been writing together for ages. He also produced the stuff that I did with my band Candlefire, who,
Yeah.
how we met, I believe, in Winchester,
It is. Yeah.
Candlefire and Arcade. Was it Arcade at the time?
That's
Was it
right.
Dot Star?
Yeah. Arcade. Yeah.
Arcade, yeah. At the railway in Winchester. But I took the song to Steve Smith, and I said to him, I wrote it in an afternoon, and then I drove up to Peterborough to play a show at the Lisboa Club in Peterborough, and I opened with it, all 8 minutes of it, as it was. And by the time I finished the song, there were a queue of about 30 people at the front of the stage, all asking how they could buy it, how they could get
Right.
hold of it. I thought, you just get, you get that feeling when you
Yeah.
write one that's kind of got a bit of power to it, a bit of, and you were like, I was kind of thinking to myself, well, okay, this could go somewhere. And I took it to Steve and Daryl Smith, and I said, Steve, what can we do with this? I said, it's too long, but it kind of feels like it's got potential, as an accessible song, as like a pop song kind of thing. But what do we do with it? And we recorded it as I had sort of put it together, and Steve chopped out, I think, 6 of the 8 verses and went, we don't need those. It says, it gets in, says what it needs to say, and then gets out. And his edit of it, was so inspired that it taught me a lot in that instant, recording it and then going back the next day and hearing what he'd done with it. In that instant, I learned it was kind of like I was on fast forward through the next 5 years of my life in terms of like learning about song structure. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is so good. And then I wanted to demo it with some vocal harmonies and a second guitar. And Steve recommended 2 guys who I knew from the circuit in Bournemouth, Simon Johnson and Gavin Wyatt. And he said, oh, they do session work and stuff. We'll get them in, and they're great harmony singers. And we all got round a mic. And I'd sort of like shown them the song and kind of taught them the parts and everything. And we got round a mic, and I just opened our mouths and sang together for the first time. And it was just like the heavens opening. It was incredible. A really inspired thing. You often hear the story about Crosby, Stills and Nash being at Joni Mitchell's house and like at a party, and Stills and Crosby are doing a song together, and Graham Nash wanders in and just lays a high harmony on it, and suddenly like all the floodlights in the world are switched on. And it wasn't quite like that, but it was like our version of it. It
Yeah.
was just,
Sure.
we, after about 4 seconds of harmonizing with each other, we all burst out laughing and just looked at each other and went, I think we formed a band, haven't we? And
Great.
that was it.
Great.
That was the Mercurymen, just from like a, the kind of demo session doing stuff together. But the songs had some real staying power, which I'm really grateful for. It's opened a lot of doors. And I get messages from people all over the world saying, oh, I saw it and heard the song in a film, and I loved it, and I heard it here, I heard it there. People find it all over the place. And it's really good. I often get asked, people say, well, aren't you sick of it? As it, it's like, don't you feel it's overplayed? Is it, it's sort of like the closest you've come to sort of a hit song. You must be tired of it. You must just want it to go away. And it's like, no, I don't feel like that at all. I feel thankful, really.
What's so interesting about that, though, as well, I mean, it's not really interesting to hear where it came from, and you as a songwriter having empathy for the position of your cousin wanting to say goodbye, and it having that kind of spirit of Matthew in it as well. It's very a beautiful story. That very beautiful. Let me just ask you a final question, my man. This is and thank you so much for your time. People listening, if you do not know the work of Jinder, you can find Jinder on Spotify, YouTube, everywhere. 14 albums. Go to his website. He will happily take your orders for his CDs and work over Christmas. And you can check out his work. But this is the question I ask everybody, as you will know because you listen and to the podcast. What song do you wish you had written?
I think for me, it would probably be Refuge of the Roads by Joni Mitchell. I think that's, I sort of, I'd go back and forth between that and The Strangest Song by Leonard Cohen. And I know as sort of reference points for a writer, Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell are quite sort of well-trodden paths. But I mean, Joni at her best was an absolute genius. And Refuge of the Roads, the whole of the Hejira album, but Refuge of the Roads, for me, her interplay, her guitar playing on that as a electric jazz guitarist, she's just phenomenal. And Jaco Pastorius's bass playing, and just the song, the imagery. You know, I about pulling into a service station and seeing a picture of the Earth taken coming back from the moon. You know, and you couldn't see a highway or a tree or anything on that marble bowling ball, and me least of all. You know, it's just again, it's a simple image about feeling insignificant, but it just wrapped in this enormous quilt of beauty, and that's I'd love to be Joni Mitchell when I grow up.
He is a genius, an absolute genius, and that's a great song to pick and a great artist to pick. Jinder, thank you so much for your time, brother. And I look forward to hearing the next album and the one after that and the one after that and the one after that and the one after that. Keep doing it, bro. Love you very much.
Excellent. Cheers. Love you, man. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it today. Thank you.